the Akashic energy, the Akashic record keepers. You all have your very own record keepers. And when people read the prayers, they are connecting to their own Akashic records through the use of these prayers. They are also asking for divine energy, healing, and guidance by using the prayers in the book.
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, the best place to shop for unique clothing, spiritual handcrafted jewelry, healing gemstones, and fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now, here's your host, Brett Larkin.
Friends, welcome to the Savannah Podcast. I'm so excited for today's topic as it's something I'm curious and excited to learn more about myself. What if there was a simple tool that could help you release anger, grief, and old negative emotions? Today's guest, Lisa Barnett, is going to tell us how, by simply reading a prayer, really that simple, we can transform from a state where we maybe feel fearful and upset to a place where we feel loved and supported. Lisa's book, From Questioning to Knowing, 73 Prayers to Transform Your Life, offers straightforward tools that help us open our heart and allow more love and abundance to flow into our lives. Before we deep dive with her, I want to remind you that leaving a rating or review for us on iTunes is so helpful, and we really also want your honest feedback. So make sure to do that on iTunes, even if iTunes isn't the way you normally listen to the show. Now, a little bit more about Lisa. She is also the founder of the Akashic Knowing School of Wisdom and is a master Akashic channel, which I think is so exciting. She's going to tell us all about what that means today. So Lisa, thanks so much for being here on the show with us.
Thank you. I am so excited to share this ancient wisdom with you and all your listeners. So thank you.
Wonderful. And I think maybe that's a great place to start. What is Akashic Wisdom? What is the Akashic Channel? And what does any of this mean to someone who just has never heard these terms before?
Right, absolutely. So the Akashic records are the records of your soul. So what happens is when our soul individuates from source, everything we do is recorded in this field, which is part of the information arm of source. So one of the ways that they sometimes talk about it with me is to say, oh, just imagine when you were born, you had a GoPro strapped to your head and everything you did in your life was recorded. So, just in that same way, all of your gifts and talents, all of your drama and trauma, all of your love and joy is all recorded in your Akashic field. And not just for this life, but if you can imagine and believe that you have been human many different times and that, this is something that is, part of your soul, the expanse of your soul, then this is really what your Akashic records are. This information is here to help and support you. So you have this huge library with hundreds and hundreds and thousands of books for all the lives that you've lived. And you've got your own librarians, which are the record keepers that keep these expansive records of your soul.
Okay, so I want to back up and make sure we really understand this at least a basic level. So my first question, before we go a little deeper into everything you just said, because I have some questions about how this maybe integrates with tantric philosophy and stuff like that. But this is different from our aura or our energy field as it is right now. What we're talking about is the energy of perhaps our past lives or what came before. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So your energy field that's around your body, your aura, all this, the 7 layers, the meridian, the chakras, all of that information and energy is actually part of the spirit and soul connection, and it expands out into a vibration, which is also part of you, like we talk about your aura and your chakra system and all of this. This is the record of your soul for thousands or millions or billions of years. Since time is not real, it doesn't really matter how long, but infinite. It's a long, long time. So your soul at this moment is in this body, but it has been in hundreds of other bodies, in other parts of the country, in other dimensions, maybe even other planets and planes. So your soul has a record as it has traveled. It would be like I say, if you recorded everything you did, whether it was via a GoPro or a video camera or, some form, maybe it was a journal that you wrote every experience you ever had in your life, that would be the record of this lifetime for you.
Got it. And you mentioned something about it's the record of our soul when it splits, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard you say it splits from sort of universal intelligence and you become an individual on this plane of consciousness. And does this have anything to do with Tantric or Samkhya philosophy, if you're familiar with those?
I'm not really familiar with those, so I can't speak clearly to that. But the information that I receive, and which is really part of many of the spiritual teachings of all kinds, is that there is a source energy and we are all part of that. And at some point, we are really just one with that. We're just part of, source. And many people, especially even in the older religions or many of the religions, would say, you're one with God. You are God. Well, the truth is that we are always part of the universal energy, the one mind, the divine source, whatever you want to call that. And at some point, we peel off a little bit, and that is your soul. So it's kind of the record keepers that keep our records are very funny because they're pure source energy themselves. They're pure souls who are individuated from source but have not ever been human. So they don't have any judgment. There is no, right or wrong in their realm of source. They're here to help and to guide and to support us. And what happens, so they tell us stories. They kind of try to explain these big picture information to, little human brains, right? Like mine. So when I'm channeling or receiving this information, they often put it in kind of words that, is something that we can kind of wrap our brain around, right? Because I think so much of this sort of information is hard for us to wrap our minds around. Just like, there really is no time or space, that the world is really an illusion. We hear these things, but how do you imagine that? How do you wrap your brain around that, right?
So I've heard you mention, so you're saying like there's record keepers of the Akashic Records. So could a parallel here be like to angels, or it's like spirits who know everything about what's gone on with all of us in our past lives and in our past energetic DNA? Is that kind of the idea?
Well, kind of, but the interesting thing is about the Akashic Records is that it is the highest energy that is accessible to us because it is still part of this source vibration. So here's the story that they tell me. I'll tell you one of their silly stories of the way they explain this to me. So just imagine, we'll call source a high rise in Manhattan. Okay, so if you imagine that this huge high rise is all the source energy, and when you choose to individuate, now you've kind of created this soul which has an edge or a boundary, and here's this soul coming down the elevator, and you step out on the street, and here you are in Manhattan, and there's buses going by and taxis, and of course there's bicyclists and people walking, and some souls might jump on a bus, go to the airport, get on a plane, go to another planet, start having an experience as a soul. Now, you're not a human, you're a soul. And maybe you go to another planet, plane, or dimension. Now, some of these souls, interestingly, imagine that a soul takes a walk down the road in Manhattan and ends up seeing this huge building, another huge building, and they go in, and it turns out to be the New York City Public Library. And it takes up a whole city block. And they go in and they say, I want to study before I go on a journey. I want to learn about Earth and about Sirius and maybe Arcturus, or where I want to go, what kind of experiences I want to have. And they study up. And these beings of light become some of them go on their journey. They learn a little and off they go. And some actually become record keepers, and they help to keep the records for other souls. So again, they're not angels. They've never been human. Actually, some angels can actually be human. The archangels are a different story. Ascended masters have had a whole cycle of lives and human lives until they ascend again and come back to teach us. But the record keepers are pure source energy. So they're not human, they're not angels, they're not ascended masters, they're not other kinds of guides, they're not from another planet. They're literally pure divine source energy. So to me, that was the highest place I could find to get information from.
All right. So what do you say to folks? Because I know both in the yoga community and people who have a deep spiritual practice and meditate regularly, a lot of them, and myself included, are curious about this, right? We're curious about past lives and this idea of karma and dharma, right? And what we're here to do, and what are the things that maybe we've inherited either from our parents or perhaps in a past life that are affecting us in some way. What do you say to people who are curious and maybe a little skeptical about this?
Oh my, let's see. There's lots of things to say, of course. So Akasha is a Sanskrit word. So it actually comes, from this ancient East Indian tradition, and it means ether or sky. And if you go to India or speak to different people, there's apparently a couple of Akashic ways to access this information. So it is well known in the ancient East Indian tradition. So there's actually a tree somewhere that the monks or read the leaves of the tree to read the records. I know that there's another place. Now, I haven't been personally to any of these sites in India, but many of my clients and students, and I have actually many, different clients from India, and they tell me about these places where you can read the records in that sort of way in India. We talk about, if you have ever read the Bible or heard the word, the book of life, it's written of in the Bible and other different religions that our names are written in the book of life. Edgar Cayce accessed the Akashic Records through a sleeping trance. And so another way to imagine the Akashic Records is this is the one mind, the infinite mind of Source. And in the infinite mind is amazing information about everything. So there's kind of the big record of everything. And Edgar Cayce accessed that very often for a lot of health information. Edgar Cayce was the sleeping prophet from the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And he started a health healing clinic in Virginia Beach, Virginia, back in the 20s or 30s. And he actually channeled through the sleeping trance a lot of health information through the Akashic Records and did a lot of work. So he kind of brought the awareness back to the planet. It was pulled away about 1,000 years ago because humanity misused this information and wisdom for their own gain. So the record keepers pulled the vibration far enough away from the earth so the only people that could really access it were the prophets, the monks, the gurus, the wise ones, the shaman.
So this has been around for thousands of years and mentioned in various ancient texts, as you say. And I want to focus on the next kind of word that you brought up for us, because I'm curious to learn more about this. As you said, a channel or a medium. Both for myself and listeners who are curious about this, I'm sure some people listening have maybe worked with a psychic or worked with a medium or gotten advice from someone in that capacity. One of my previous podcast guests was just saying how someone in that line of work really helped her stay true to her calling during a very difficult time in her life. But what does it really mean to be a channel, like at the most basic level? How does that work?
Yeah, so actually the word channel, people use in a couple of different ways. So I'm, happy to clarify that. So there are people like, probably one of the best known is Esther Hicks, and she channels Abraham. You familiar with Esther Hicks and Abraham?
Yes, that's a great example.
Okay, so Esther Hicks is a full body channel. That means her spirit actually steps aside and lets Abraham's spirit energy into her body, and it takes over her body, so she speaks. And from what I understand, she doesn't really remember what she says because she's a full body channel. So that is one type of channel. And then there are some people who say, that they're kind of partial channels. And that means that the beings actually also come into their space and speak through them, but they're a little more conscious and aware and can kind of converse along with the beings or the entities. So often channeling has been thought of as that kind of more full body or at least partial body being taken over in a way. And it's actually more rare to be able to do that. You have to have a body type that makes that possible. Otherwise, it's very hard on your body. Most of us are not fluid or porous enough for our spirits to move out of the physical and let another spirit in and then, change places. And the full body or even partial body channels, I know, say it's very exhausting to channel. So that's one type of channel, and I'm not that type of channel. What I say is that I channel the Akashic Records because they speak to me. They give me images, energy, pictures. I'm clairaudient, clairvoyant, clairsentient, and I receive all this information, and it comes to me and through me. So I pass it on. So with my clients, or just like today, I answer questions as I hear them. So they really kind of answer through me. So I just say, I'm channeling their wisdom because I'm hearing it and receiving it, and I'm answering. I can kind of answer whatever that question is. I don't need to know it because I ask them.
Other words that I've heard, because I think it's so great to get clarity around this, because I've always wondered about all these different words, is like someone being a medium or clairvoyant or a psychic, right? Are all of those things kind of similar ideas, or are these different as well?
Different people use these words in kind of different ways. So a medium is usually more of a full body or partial body channel. So the medium tends to mean that I'm a channel and I'm letting this spirit or whoever. So some people actually are channeling dead people or, spirits that are unembodied. So a medium is usually a channel kind of in that full body way, and they may be a partial body or conscious channel. So a medium and a channel are really pretty much the same thing as a rule. That's the way I, learned it. And people use verbiage in all sorts of different ways. But so what was the other one you asked? I'm sorry.
No, I was asking about words like clairvoyant or psychic or things like that.
Sure. So clairvoyant just means that you're a seer. So psychics tend to be, so psychic means more that you are usually able to receive information that is, more in these realms, in the psychic realms. So clairaudience is you hear, clairvoyance is you see, clairsentience you feel, claircognizance is clear knowing. It's a knowingness. And so most psychics or even intuitives would say, I'm intuitive or I'm a psychic and I'm very clairvoyant. They get most of their information visually. They see, some of them may even see auras, but they see pictures. They may get past life information or childhood information. And often it comes through as pictures or even like a video, like a movie. And I hear more. So I'm very clairaudient. I can hear their voice, though for most of us who are also clairaudient, we hear a voice, but we often hear it in our own kind of voice or tone. It just says different things than I would say. So when my Akashic Masters told me a year ago, they said, write another book. It sounds like me, but the tonality and the energy is definitely not me. So that's clairaudience.
So how does someone like you learn to do this, and how do they become what you are? And then my next question for you after that is, why are most people or some people really interested in accessing this knowledge, and what can it do for us in our daily life? I think that's where I want to go next, but I'm curious to understand and discover how you became an Akashic Master.
Well, yes, it's a great question. So, for me, it's been a lifelong path. When I was 3 years old, I had an epiphany that I was trapped in a body and I wanted to go home. And I told my mother, I want to go back, I want to go home. And my poor mother said, but honey, you're 3. You are home. This is home. So what happens for many people who tend to be on this very early spiritual path or are very psychic, they're gifts that we really bring with us. And for many of us, we, always have them. So we may have those imaginary friends. Maybe we talk to the fairies or to angels or to, dead people because we have that ability to see them. And so if we don't block it, we keep that ability. So for me, I was blessed to not really block it. And so I started studying when I was about 13, as soon as I was kind of old enough to, grasp it and pick up regular books and read books about. I started reading things like Journeys Out of the Body by Robert Monroe. I wanted to learn how to get out of my body, right? So there was my first favorite book, Journeys Out of the Body. And there was many, at that point, it was the late 60s, early 70s. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi was just bringing the information right through the Beatles, TM, East was meeting West, Yogananda. All of that information was really available, for the first time. And so I started to read all of that and went on to, minor in philosophy in college because I was so fascinated. So it became a lifelong, path and study for me. And then I eventually started to study energy healing because I could feel that desire that I knew I was more of a healer and started to work in these bigger realms. And the interesting thing with the Akashic Records for me was that I worked with an amazing teacher who was a fabulous energy healer. And she said, you can go up to the Akashic Records and ask them for information and energy to give to your client after you do some healing and clearing on them. But you are not allowed to go into their Akashic record. Those are the rules. And I said, okay, sure. What do I know?
So it's sort of like asking the librarian to go get you a book or go get you information instead of going to get the book yourself, sort of.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Exactly. So literally to me, it would be like going up to the door of the library and knocking and saying, please, can I have a book for my client, right? And I would see energy, and sometimes it would come in like a book was falling from the heavens, or there was a beautiful sparkly waterfall pouring down into this person's crown chakra, or, I could see this energy coming into their body and filling them up. And I'd say, thank you. And, off I'd go. And so that went on for years. And then what I started to notice is that I would get occasionally when I would connect with certain clients, I get this huge expansive information, very deep, and past lives and soul contracts and purpose or gifts or, just information that was way more than I ever got as a psychic intuitive energy healer that I was. And I always kind of went into the past life realms. I seem to have, maybe I've just had so many darn past lives that I'm really comfortable over there in the olden days. But when I started to access this information and I would get kind of a big booming voice. And I'd always think, wow, that was amazing. That was huge. That was way more expansive and way more information than I ever get as a psychic intuitive healer. And it took me almost 5 years before I realized that the Akashic record keepers were speaking to me because I was stuck on a picture that said, you don't get to go in. So like I mentioned, that 1,000 years ago, this energy was pulled away from the earth because we misused it. And that information was still holding true in the world, which is you don't get to go in. You can't access that. You can ask for help, just like you can ask your angels for help, but you don't get to go to that realm. And the truth was that isn't correct anymore. That isn't true anymore. So they started talking to me. And as I realized I could talk to them and have these long conversations, they gave me lots and lots of information. And they eventually said, we want you to start a school so you can teach other people how to do this, and we'll give you information. And they gave me a 5-step wisdom prayer system, a simple 5-step system that I teach to my students so they can access their own Akashic records and have that sort of divine guidance every day.
Well, that's perfect because it leads into my next question, which was that does someone have to really work with someone like you to tap into this knowledge, or is it something we can all do ourselves? And I'm sure the answer is a little bit of both, but maybe the best thing for you to do is to tell us a little bit about this 5-step system if you're willing to.
Absolutely. So you're of course correct about a little bit of both. And part of what I notice is it depends on really where a person is on their spiritual path and sometimes just where they are in their life and what they're dealing with. So if you have a lot of, say, pain, emotional pain, trauma, maybe ill health, money blocks, you've got some stuff that's really up in your life, it may be easier to have an Akashic record reading and healing than to learn to do it yourself. So we want to kind of clear the old energy, open some space, release old blocks, finish some karma, work through some of the contracts, help people do that so they can raise their vibration to do it for themselves. So the 5-step wisdom prayer system literally is the Akashic Masters have given me a sacred vibrational key, which is a prayer, a sacred prayer. And in the 5 steps, it's very simple because, of course, we're going to start by clearing our space and setting our intention. Then we're going to choose what we want to work on because having a good question leads you to the part of your Akashic records where you can get those answers. So if we just go into the records, and I know many people do this kind of accidentally through a meditation or a guided visualization, and they go into this beautiful realm and they may access this gorgeous Akashic garden or they, do this amazing meditation. And the energy is beautiful and we can receive healing and it's quite lovely, but we rarely have the ability to have a real conversation and say, how can I clear these money blocks? How can I shift some of these things that are in my life? And so when we learn to access the records consciously by opening our own records, writing questions that are beneficial to us, like, what is this about? What is this money block about? Then we can say, what can I clear? Is it from a past life? Is there karma attached? Do I have a past life vow? So I teach people how to ask questions to get to all the aspects and all the levels and layers of the why am I blocked around money or around relationships or around this emotional pain or trauma. So,
I think what you're saying is really interesting. Sorry, I just want to pause you before you tell us the next step because I think a lot of listeners, whether they believe in past lives or they believe in the Akashic Records or anything else, probably have had the experience of feeling very in a transformational state, whether it's through their yoga practice or their meditative practice of feeling very connected to either source energy or God or whatever it is they want to call it. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that if we don't have a clear question ready, it's sort of like we're knocking on the door of that library and just being like, hey, what's up? And they don't have, we're not setting that intention, as you say, or setting a stage for something we very clearly want to work on. So while we're maybe bathing in this energy or feeling this transformative sensation on the subtle body or on an energetic level, or maybe even physically, if we don't have that clear intention, I'm sure there's still a benefit, but it's like we're not getting everything we could out of being in that state. Am I understanding that right?
You are absolutely. So it's very true. I love to go sit in the Akashic field, and I even do a meditation where we go into the records and there's a beautiful garden and you can bathe in the river of forgiveness and you can reclaim some energy and meditations from these beautiful marble columns. And it's lovely and luscious and healing. And that's great. I'm all for that also. But for many of us, we have questions, right? We are like, what is stopping me? Why am I afraid to leave this job and look for a better one? Why am I afraid to commit to this relationship? Do I actually have a soul contract with this person I'm thinking about marrying or living with? And so we have a lot of questions, I think, as humans with very active brains. And the reason I love the Akashic Records and teaching people to do this is you can take these questions and go in and get very real information on healing steps and actually like even next steps. I do business readings for people around their businesses. Is it in your highest and best good to start this business, to partner with this person? Do you have karma with them? Do you have a soul contract, which can be very different? Karma and soul contracts are different. Do you have lessons that you want to learn with this person? What did you write about in your soul plan? Is this in your soul plan? So it's very helpful to look at all this information and aspects kind of before we go charging ahead in life. And, of course, before we maybe take that big leap, and also when we're stuck. Why am I stuck? There's so many unconscious beliefs, and they may come from our childhood, they come from our family, they can be genetic, they can be passed down through our ancestral lineage. Even if you don't believe in past lives, that's okay too, because there's so much in this life to work on and to work with.
I love it. So, and as someone who practices and also teaches a lot of Kundalini yoga, I think Kundalini yoga specifically is so great at getting our prana activated and sort of getting us in maybe some of these altered, really incredible states. But oftentimes it's as you're saying, like you're just there and you're not prepared with a question. It's not specific. You're not like ready to receive a very specific download. And I think any way that people could get more educated about that, if they're interested in it, would be really beneficial for their personal practice, for their personal spiritual practice. But I want you to keep going. So I think that was step one, right? It was like really getting clear on our question and our intention of what we want to receive information on. What are the next steps?
So that's 1 and 2. So 3 is actually using one of the vibrational keys to access the records. And this to me is the huge gift that you don't have to do an hour-long meditation. You don't have to be an amazing, yogi. You don't have to have already purified and raised your vibration to do this. No, what I do find is that most of the people who are interested in the Akashic field and this sort of energy work do have a higher vibration, are on a spiritual path, whether it's more through the physical yoga and that path. Many of them are through more of a dharma path of service, or just a spiritual seeker and a path of, I know there's more here. I want to know what it is, and I want to know what's stopping me from creating the life my heart and soul desire. So when I look at it that way, you can really ask about everything, which is why the questions are important. And I like to remind my students that this is a lifelong path. And the Akashic Masters say that the Akashic Records is also a path to enlightenment, as well as I also believe Kundalini Yoga is. And I'm a big fan of that myself. And so we know there's, whatever, hundreds or thousands of paths to the top of the mountain. And one is by being able to see the big picture of life, the big picture of our souls and our soul journey through time immemorial, and to understand that we come to learn and to grow. So in one life, I may have had a little business and a business partner, and maybe that partner ran off with all of our money and left me high and dry. And in this life, because of that, unconsciously, I'm afraid to start a business, and I'm afraid to partner with anyone. And I don't know why I'm afraid. So you go into your records and you say, I really feel like I'd like to start a business. I think I have some talents. I'd like to bring them out to the world. I think I'm supposed to, but there's something blocking me. There's something stopping me. I feel kind of afraid of it, and I don't know why. So we can go into the Akashic Records, ask the beings of light, the record keepers, why? What is up? What is stopping this person from starting this business, from bringing their gifts and talents out? And we get this sort of information. Well, this past life, they had this experience. This other life, they took a vow of poverty, which keeps them from feeling that they're allowed or able to go charge for their gifts and talents. And then there's some childhood beliefs, that their parents used to talk about, how hard it was to start a business. And, they've taken that in kind of unconsciously. So here's 3 layers of information that we can work with to clear and release some of this block that you just don't know what it is. So now we've cleared these blocks, and I find my clients will go, wow, I just feel so much better, more expansive, lighter. I'm going to go talk to that partner. I'm going to start to work on my business plan. I'm going to start to take steps to move forward.
Perfect. So coming back to the steps, is that the last step or is there more?
Well, that's the big working in the record step.
Okay.
And then step 4 is filling yourself up. After you've cleared all that old garbage, you want to fill yourself up with the highest energy you can hold, the highest Akashic Record wisdom, reclaim your gifts and talents from any other lifetime that will, say, help support you with this business. And then the 5th step is to close and lock your records. And on you go with your day.
Beautiful. Now, I want to ask you about 2 words that I've heard you say a couple times because I'm very curious. One is karma, which I think a lot of our listeners are probably familiar with, but I want to hear it from your lips what it means in this context. And the other is this word contract, right? Which I would totally expect to hear if I were interviewing a lawyer, for example, but I wasn't expecting it to come up so often in our conversation. So I want you to explain for us what that's all about too.
Absolutely. So kind of the big way of looking at it is because your soul is ancient and we live many, many, many hundreds of lives here on Earth alone, not to mention the other realms. But what happens with Earth, and the reason that we live hundreds of lives here, is that we, let's say, make a mistake, and then we choose to come back and learn about what I'm just going to call a mistake. So again, let's go use the business example where in this lifetime that your business partner ran off with all your money. And so you say, this lifetime, this is your plan. This is part of your soul plan that you write before you embody into a physical body. So your soul makes a whole big plan before you get into a body. So you say, this time I am going to learn to trust again. I am going to figure out how to really be conscious and choose a good business partner. And I'm going to learn and heal my fear about trusting other people. So this is really a piece of karma, which is learning and growing. So karma in the Akashic Records is not a punishment, but it is about completing a cycle and learning and understanding how that those lessons, that growth, and really understanding both sides of it. So if you could come back into this world and into this life and say, maybe you're unconscious of this lifetime where you lost your business to your partner, and one life you might come back and you never start that business because you're afraid. And so you just, kind of go on and you work for other people. And you may have 2 or 3 lives where you want to come back and step into your power and start a business and really gain that faith and trust again in humanity. And it might take you 4 lives to finish that karma. And that karma may have started before because maybe you were the one who started the cycle by running off with the goods of another business, by deserting a business partner, by doing something that kind of created this cycle of learning. And karma really is about learning both sides. So if we've had someone steal our business, the likelihood is that we've done something similar to someone else in another lifetime, or it could be in the same life. So it's a whole cycle. It's learning both sides of the coin. It's understanding. And a big piece of healing karma is forgiveness. So it's about saying, I know you're learning. Maybe you stole the business because you were in fear that you didn't have enough and your family was going to starve. Or maybe you got really greedy and you're working through this whole greed factor. And so you ran off with, the cart and the horse and all the hats. Maybe you had a hat business or, something like that, right? So the karma is about learning. It's about soul growth. It's about understanding both sides and moving into forgiveness. And when we can do that, the karma is complete. So it's never really about being punished. It's not about right or wrong. It's not, about being bad and being punished. It's about learning and understanding and growing. And it maybe unpleasant. I'm not saying that, having someone steal your business is, a happy situation. But if you can see that person who stole your business as a divine soul, having a human experience and being challenged by that human experience for some reason or other, if you can come to a place where you can see life maybe through their eyes, your soul is growing exponentially and very deeply spiritually. And then you are done with that lesson. You are done with that karma.
It sounds like whether someone's interested or believes in past lives or not, what you're really talking about is inviting in a huge sense of self-compassion for both yourself and for things that are perhaps beyond your control. And I think everyone can relate at least to that idea.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. I really, so it doesn't matter. It can be, and, there's a lot of people I see kind of that instantaneous karma, whether, it's a big thing or a little thing, but sometimes we see those things show up kind of quickly. Like maybe we make a choice, we realize that wasn't really in the highest and best good of, everyone concerned. Maybe, we got the good end of the stick and someone else got the short end. And then, we turn around and something similar like that happens in the flip side. And we learn and we can say, I'm so sorry that I did that to you. And we can be compassionate to ourselves and to the other people. And we can maybe right that mistake, or we can, share that we understand that we've learned. And so in that way, we can kind of heal and learn and grow, on a soul level, quickly in one lifetime, certainly.
And you've used the word in our time together, soul contract. Is that a little bit what we're talking about here? It's sort of this idea that the Akashic Records, it has a little book or a contract for my time on Earth in this lifetime, the things that I'm here to learn and clear and hopefully do. Is that what the soul contract is? Or is it a contract that you have with someone else? Can you walk us through that?
Yes, absolutely. So they're really contracts that you write with other people. So the kind of the big picture would be, I'm going to write a whole soul plan, and that's going to be to bring certain gifts and talents to this world. So if I use myself as an example, because of course that's easy, I can talk about myself. So I've written 2 books. So I've connected to some gifts and talents around communication. Part of my purpose is to communicate the Akashic wisdom to the world. I also have 3 children, and I've raised my nephew. So I have 4 souls that had soul contracts to be my children. And so the interesting thing is that I never thought I'd have more than 2 kids. I was really not, 2 kids. Okay, that's plenty. So I had my son. I thought, well, okay, so maybe we'll have 1 more. And I had identical twin girls. So all of a sudden I had 3. And then my nephew moved in. And I thought, what the heck is this? I'm in total overwhelm because my son is 1.5. My twins are newborns, and I now have a 13-year-old. And this literally happened in like a year and a half. I went from 1 to 4 in a year and a half. And I said to the records, I said to the Akashic Masters, like, what is up here? This is, I'm not all excited about this. I wasn't planning on being a mother of a lot, And they said to me, you had 4 soul contracts with these souls. You as a person and a personality, now at 40, are not going to have a bunch of more kids. So these souls decided if they wanted to have you as a mom, they had to figure out how to get into your life. So 2 of them came in as twins, and my nephew came into my brother's family, and then I became his mother. So these are contracts that we have with other people. And sometimes they're wonderful. I have to say I have 4 amazing, wonderful children. My nephew is 36 now. My kids are 21, 22. and it's wonderful. My nephew's here visiting from Phoenix. And as a matter of fact, I'm laughing because he, just every morning we get our coffee and we sit together and we visit. He says, mornings are my favorite with you. I just love, you guys. And I just love coming and hanging out with you guys in the morning and having morning coffee together. And so I'm very blessed by these souls, but not all soul contracts are easy. Sometimes they have karma attached, so they may have some real challenges. And so some of them are support, like I have with my children and my husband. Some of them are to learn and to grow. Sometimes we have soul contracts with a significant other just to have children. So it's not so uncommon to see maybe a woman get pregnant and then the man disappears, or they're married for a year and they get divorced. And so these are all soul contracts, and they're just different kinds.
That's great. Thank you for clarifying what that means. And it sounds like you have such a beautiful, beautiful family. I want you to tell us, before we let you go, a little bit about your most recent book, which is the 73 Prayers book, because I know I promised listeners at the beginning of the podcast that by looking or reading a simple prayer, we can really shift our energy in a powerful way. And I'm curious if these prayers are similar to like affirmations or mantras or something like that people might be familiar with, or exactly how they're displayed and related to in your book.
So because I literally did channel this book, I sat down for 8 days, two 4-day sessions, and just wrote everything that came through me. What the Akashic Masters have done is they've given us a lot of information. So it talks about soul contracts with our family, challenging emotions with, people, significant people in our lives. We have soul contracts. Many people, even I'm sure listeners, have soul contracts to help to heal the planet, to be earth guardians. So they talk about so much of this different information, what karma means in the Akashic Records, and how we can heal that through a forgiveness prayer that they've given us. But there's many, many prayers, and many of them are very simple and short. They may be, 6, 8, 10 lines long. They're not, pages of prayer. But what the Akashic Masters have done is they have imbued them with this divine source, high vibrational Akashic energy. So what I'm noticing as I read these, either, on a show or in a class, or I have lots of people who are writing to me who have bought my book and are working with the prayers, and they say, I'm having these miraculous experiences. I feel the energy change. I read this once and around, blame or about guilt, and I felt that energy dissipate, and I lost that feeling of blaming someone for what happened to me. And I all of a sudden woke up and realized it was my choice. And there people are like, it's kind of amazing. So the Akashic energy, the Akashic record keepers, you all have your very own record keepers. And when people read the prayers, they are connecting to their own Akashic records through the use of these prayers. They are also asking for divine energy, healing, and guidance by using the prayers in the book.
So it sounds like for someone who's practicing yoga or doing meditating, that this book could be the kind of thing that they'd keep near their mat or keep near their bedside to sort of read and review these prayers, to just try to access some of this information or get more in touch with this Akashic field of energy on a daily basis. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So 73 prayers is a pretty lot, right? And so I just suggest very often to people, you can open the book and just pick a prayer, or they're all listed out. You can go through and say, what's up for me today? So a couple of my favorite prayers, there's a prayer for world peace, which is lovely to say every day. There's a prayer for self-love and self-trust. Many of us have old kind of fears and blocks around trusting ourselves. Maybe your family didn't trust you, and so you grew up not trusting yourself. There's a prayer for alignment, which helps us to step into alignment with our higher self, with our soul, with the bigger you that you really are. And so they're right here helping us in this moment. There's a prayer to assist in forward motion. So if you feel kind of blocked or stuck and you want to do something, whether it's, get back on your mat because you haven't done your practice for a couple of days, or it's starting a business, or, joining a group, you could do the prayer to assist in forward motion, because it helps to release the ties that are binding us and holding us back.
Beautiful. Well, we'll put a link both to your website and the book right below this episode. And before I let you go, there's one last thing I have to ask you, because you mentioned it a couple times, and I definitely just want to hear you dig a little deeper. You mentioned that time and space don't exist. And I think obviously this is a massive question. We could probably do an entire episode just on this. But I was just curious for you to give listeners a taste of exactly what you meant by that. I know when I was younger, I read the book, The Holographic Universe. Have you read that one?
I have not.
So it talks a little bit about, time as an illusion, and it compares it with lots of mathematical concepts. But I wanted to hear in your voice before we let you go what that means to you and how listeners could use that in their daily life as a source of potentially comfort or guidance.
Yeah, so because I work in these expansive records, and often when I work with clients and teach people how to do this, I see past lives like they're laid out on a timeline. And what the Akashic Record Keepers say is that just makes it easy for our human brains to kind of, hold that concept. But what I know is that when I go back into a past life, whether it's 200 years ago or 2,000 years ago, if I heal that physical and emotional and energetic trauma that is blocking you, people have a immediate response. They have an opening, a release where they all of a sudden feel they can make a step forward, immediately make a change. And what the masters say about this is because there is no time and space, it flows like a ball of light and energy. It's a circle. And so I can heal the past, and I have that immediate effect because it's all happening at the same time. And I can shift my intention for the future if I realize that I've put energy out into the future that maybe no longer serves me or isn't the path I want to be on now. It can be helpful to call that future energy back and set a new intention and to put that new desire out so that you're not working from, say, an old model or an old paradigm from when you were a child. So time is very fluid. It's all happening at the same time. I see it as a beautiful golden swirling ball of light, the image they give me. And there is actually a prayer to expand time in the book.
Wow. I'm visualizing it's like a wormhole or something like that, or a vortex that cuts through time. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing all your knowledge with us, because I know that all of this is things that so many people are curious about, but they don't often get the chance to sit down with someone like you and, just ask really practical questions. So I'm really appreciative that I've got the chance to do that with you today. And if people want to learn more, again, I'll put the links below, but why don't you tell us as well, what's the best way for them to find you?
AkashicKnowing.com. So my website, AkashicKnowing.com. And you'll find on the home page, I have 3 free gifts. If you're interested in getting more information, 2 of them are guided meditations I've channeled through the Akashic Record. And 1 is a beautiful ebook of prayers for self-love and self-healing. So there's 3 free gifts you can go and download. You'll see classes I'm teaching. I've got a weekend workshop in Denver coming up in August and 1 in San Francisco coming in October. And I teach this 5-step wisdom prayer system online, and we'll be teaching again in the fall. So there's all of that available. You'll see on my website, as well as if you want to check into doing a one-on-one Akashic healing session and get some healing and clearing and learn about your soul plan and what some of your gifts and talents are, some of your purpose. And that's all available. You'll find all of that at AkashicKnowing.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we will keep in touch. Listeners, let me know, what are your thoughts on today's episode? Who do you want to see as future guests on the podcast? We love your feedback and, of course, your reviews. So make sure to leave a review on iTunes and make sure you're part of the Savannah East Facebook group if you're not already, so we can discuss more about the show and what we want to see in upcoming episodes. Sending you so much love and healing energy from both Lisa and myself. From our hearts to yours, namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.